welcome to my review of The Massacre, the fifth story of the third season of classic Doctor Who, and the 22nd story overall. It's written by John Le Carrotti, and this is his third and final story he writes for Doctor Who. The Massacre is 4 episodes long and is the 7th pure historical story for Doctor Who. Unfortunately, The Massacre is the 8th missing episode of Doctor Who, and all 4 episodes are missing, but only the audio and a few promotional photographs exist. Nothing really much of the story exists, not even any surviving clips or anything. Okay, so the plot of The Massacre is as follows. The TARDIS materializes in Paris in the year 1572, and the Doctor decides to visit the famous apothecary Charles Preslin. Stephen, meanwhile, is befriended by a group of Huguenots from the household of the Protestant Admiral de Coligny. Having rescued a young serving girl, Anne Chaplet, from the pursuing guards, the Huguenots gained their first inkling of the heinous plan hatched at the command of the Catholic Queen Mother, Catherine de' Medici. So, The Massacre is a very good story. It's basically a story that's told from Stephen's perspective, and it's technically a Doctor-like story, and the Doctor only appears in the first and last episode. He doesn't appear in episode 2, but William Hartnell, he plays another character, but I'll get more on that later. Not later, but so he basically plays another role. I think his character's named the Abbot of Amboise, and he appears at the end of episode 1, briefly in episode 2 because William Hartnell was on holiday for episode 2. He appears a lot more in episode 3, dies in episode 3, and the Doctor comes back in episode 4. And I also liked how accurately dark and gritty the story was. It's basically the Daleks' master plan, minus the Daleks, and it's set in a historical setting. There was a bit at the end which uses artwork on how gruesome the massacre was, featuring people getting killed. You saw like the drum beats, you saw how gruesome it was, people were dying, people being chased by guards and stuff like that. It was quite dark and quite scary as well. It's a shame the story is missing. We've seen what the story was like. Peter Purves does an amazing job carrying the story in Hartnell's reduced role, and I think this story and Master Plan and I think The Savages as well is where he shines. Stephen is with Huguenot allies and such as Nicholas, and they're all very good allies to Stephen, and they're all very good actors as well. I can't really remember all of their names, but yeah. Hartnell played the role of the Abbot of Amboise very well, and it was as if he wasn't playing the Doctor. It's just a shame really, because he is the main guy in Doctor Who. And there was also Anne Chaplet, the young serving girl who Stephen saves. I remember her not being so bad. I mean, her case was quite sad, being chased by the guards and possibly dying when the Doctor and Stephen left France, even though she may have survived because of Dodo existing in that time. Yeah, but the villains of this story, who the Doctor doesn't meet, are Catherine de' Medici, the mother of King Charles I. I remember her and King Charles from the CW TV show Reign, which was actually very underrated, even a bit inaccurate, but it's still quite enjoyable to watch. Haven't finished watching it, but I remember watching it a few years ago and I was quite interested in it. And she was the one who pretty much comes up with the idea to assassinate Gaspard de Coligny, but it fails and she convinces Charles to go through with the massacre. Despite limited appearances, she does play a huge part in the whole massacre itself. The second villain is Gaspard de Tavannes. My French isn't very good. I have a French friend, maybe he can help me with these pronunciations. He also plays a part in the assassination of the colony, but when he fails, he puts the blame on the Abbot, and then the Abbot of Ambrose, Hartnell's character, then the Abbot is killed, which then leads to the epic cliffhanger, which I'll get to in a bit. And the final villain is Simon Duval. He served Savotan, and he dies in a sword fight in the novelization of The Massacre. They're all very good field villains. It's very hard to choose who's the best of the three because they're all quite good, and obviously I watched the Who Recons version of it, and it's a bit hard to tell who's who. Okay, but I did think the 4 episodes was appropriate for this story. The pacing was very well done, and it didn't disappoint. I actually liked the cliffhanger of episode 1 where William Hartnell showed up as the Abbot, and I bet that people thought that was the Doctor in disguise. Even I thought that was the Doctor in disguise for a bit, but even though I knew of the story and I knew how Hartnell was playing 2 roles in the story, even though he didn't do that much. It's not like Enemy of the World where Charlton was flip-flopping between the Doctor and Salamander. But that's another very good example of the actor playing the Doctor playing separate, the same different roles. I hope we do get to see that in Jodie Whittaker's run of the Doctor at some point. I'll get to that later. But I love the episode 3 cliffhanger as well, which was very intense. I mean, probably one of the most intense cliffhangers since Master Plan. Funny that there was a story before, but which is the Abbot has been killed, and then Steven shows up, wondering what's happening, thinking that's the Doctor, and then someone points out, hey, that's the murderer, get him, and Steven is like running for his life in the streets of Paris. That was quite tense. I mean, well, considering in fact this is the Massacre, and Stephen himself has come out as a Protestant, and that was quite dark and quite scary as well. I mean, he must have had a glimpse of how Anne Chaplin must have been feeling throughout the whole story. Okay, so towards the end of the story, the Doctor and Stephen depart from Paris, and Stephen has had enough of the Doctor deciding not to. He wasn't happy with the Doctor's non-interference policy. We're following the non-interference policy, saying, "How can you do that? This is a human life. We don't know. She's just an ordinary girl. You never know if she'll live or die." And then the Doctor was like, "I can't change." You know, the Doctor's always like, even from the Aztecs or all the historical stories, he's been repeating this. Even though he does interfere with some historical aspects and stuff, like accidentally giving Nero the idea to set Rome on fire, and bloody coming up with the Trojan horse. The Doctor was like, "Oh, I can't interfere with the course of history." And then Stephen was like, "Wherever the TARDIS lands next, I'm leaving because I don't want to be a part of this whatsoever." So after Stephen leaves, we have a nice speech from the Doctor as he's remembering all the past companions, saying how they're all impatient to get back to their times, and how he has to follow the course of history. Sorry, he can't interfere with the course of history, and then mentions all the companions' names he traveled with: Ian, Vicky, Barbara, and Susan. And I remember he was like, "Oh, mighty little Susan." As for Vicky and Barbara and Chatterton, and then corrects himself as Chesterton. I actually love that scene. And speaking of Ian and Barbara, there's actually supposed to have appeared in the closing minutes of the scene. They were walking where the TARDIS had landed and took off, and they probably like, "Oh, that's the Doctor." Yeah. And then the Doctor was also like, "Maybe I should return to my home planet, but I can't. And obviously this probably ties in with him being a renegade Time Lord, and this probably will tie in with the War Games, which at some point, hopefully in a few months or so, I'll get to that point. And then all of a sudden, we have a new companion who joins in. Her name is Dodo Chaplet, who is a descendant or possible descendant of Anne. Well, a very possible descendant of Anne, because she does mention having French relatives. I think she stumbles into the TARDIS because a boy was hurt, and then she's like, the Doctor, you have to do something. There's a boy hurt, and then Stephen runs in, and then "Oh, you're back!" And then suddenly, Stephen not noticing Dodo was there, the Doctor decides to take off because the policemen were coming, and Stephen was like to Dodo, "How did you get in here?" And then Dodo was like, "On my feet, the same way as you did." I actually, that just pretty much establishes the sort of character Dodo is. I mean, so Dodo actually joins in this talk, and Dodo is now the new companion, and she does actually stay on for a bit compared to Katerina and Sarah. She actually stays on to the War Machines, which is the end of season 3. Well, halfway through the War Machines, because I'll get to whatever happened to Dodo at the end when I get to my War Machines review soon. But that was actually a very good scene, and it was a good introduction for Dodo, and her first full story is my next review, The Ark, and she actually does impress me. I know I'll get to the Ark at some point, but I remember during the whole Doctor's speech of returning to Gallifrey, possibly returning to Gallifrey after all his companions had gone. I remember this scene was portrayed in Adventures in Space and Time, and Hartnell was actually struggling to remember the speech, and it was so hard to watch. I mean, obviously at this point, I think his health issues was getting a lot worse, and it was just very hard. It was just very painful to watch. It just made me feel sad, and actually made me feel very sorry for Hartnell. And that movie was just, I need to watch it again. I mean, just thinking about that scene just makes me feel sad. But okay, so all the sad stuff aside, the problems I sort of have with the Massacre, I think what happened to the Doctor while Stephen was going through hell with the Catholics and all that. I mean, it was a very lackluster explanation. I mean, the Doctor was pretty much the apothecary for pretty much the whole thing, and then not knowing what the hell was going on. I think, okay, maybe the Doctor must have had some idea. Maybe when Stephen told him about it, and then that's when the Doctor was like, Stephen, you have to go. But I really wonder what the hell him and that apothecary were talking about, which pretty much took him out of action for the whole story. And it was also anticlimactic, to be honest. I mean, what we were all thinking, the Doctor would probably be hurt. He was probably being killed by the savages. Sorry, not the savages, the Catholics. And then all of a sudden, he just shows up out of the blue from the apothecary saying, "Oh, I'm okay. And then I was just with the apothecary. But also the abbot himself. I mean, he appears at the end of episode 1. Briefly appears in episode 2 because Hartnell went on holiday, and then episode 3 he does a little bit, but there's not really much. I mean, the abbot doesn't really do a whole lot. I mean, I think the highlights of the abbot was when Stephen met the abbot, and then Stephen obviously thinking that was the Doctor was talking to him, and then obviously the Doctor is not the abbot, and then all of a sudden the abbot suddenly dies, and then Stephen is accused of killing the abbot. What? But it doesn't really bring the story down. I mean, this is an enjoyable story. This is definitely one of Hartnell's best, and definitely one of the best historicals of Doctor Who. I mean, all these points I mentioned about the stuff I had the problems with, I wouldn't really mark it down, but I give a little. It doesn't really affect my opinion of the story a little bit, but if it was done properly, it would probably be the perfect 10. But I give the Massacre an 8 out of 10. I mean, it's an underrated historical, and there's a huge shame it's missing. I do hope the BBC actually does animate it, so hopefully people just get the whole aspect of historicals being boring and stuff. Just get rid of that mindset and just animate the whole story, even though no telesnaps exist, but except from loose cannon, just use your imagination, please, and hopefully animate it, or hopefully the story does somehow show up maybe in an archive somewhere, or a private collector has it, or it's just lying gathering dust somewhere in the country or something. Hopefully Nigeria, which was where Enemy of the World and Web of Fear was found, where I'm from. But hopefully it does come back soon, or it does get animated soon. So my next story is the Ark. This is actually the first of 3 stories of season 3 that actually exist in full. So everything exists of that story. So stick around for that. Thank you for watching this review. Leave a comment and tell me how I did this review and what you thought of the Massacre. And I'll see you later.